In this video, you will learn to identify, recognize, and use modals, which are special types of helping verbs. A modal is a helping verb that is joined with a main verb to express an attitude toward the action or state of being of the main verb. It's kind of wordy. Basically, it's a helping verb. But unlike the helping verbs that we use to create progressive and future tenses, modals really have to do more with special circumstances. So let's take a look at some examples. Can and could are modals that are used to express ability. How far can you run? I could not lift the suitcase. Pretty straightforward. In the first example, can is a helping verb. Run is the main verb. It's asking about our ability to run. And then the second example, lift is the main verb. Could is telling us something about our ability to lift. May is used to express permission or possibility. Some of you probably have had the experience of asking a teacher, can I go to the bathroom? And getting the sarcastic response, I don't know, can you? Because what they're doing is trying to teach you, rather sarcastically, the difference between can and may. So can is an ability. As somebody who's in school, you should be able to go to the bathroom. So the correct verb to use there is may, because you're really asking permission. May I use the restroom? Add a please for effect. I may have left my phone at home. So this is an example where may is indicating a possibility. It's possible that I left my phone at home. I'm not sure where it is. In the first example, use is the main verb. Left is the main verb in the second example. Note that have is also a helping verb because what that's doing, I have left my phone at home, is giving us a tense change that's different from left my phone at home. Might is similar to may, and the difference isn't really that big of a deal, but just so that you're aware of how to properly use them, if you're using might, the likelihood of the action occurring in the main verb is slightly less than if you have may. So here's an example of that. I might want to pursue a career as a dancer, but I don't think my parents will support me. So what we have here is the idea that this is a possibility, but it's slightly less likely to happen than if I had used the word may. I may want to pursue a career as a dancer. The possibility is slightly increased there. Technically speaking, anyway. Must expresses a requirement. You must finish reading the novel by Friday. This is something that, based on the context of the sentence, your teacher is asking you to do. It is a requirement for the class. Ought, similar to must, is used to express an obligation or a likelihood. This is something you should be doing, but it's stronger than should. You ought to think about the effects your words will have on others. We actually probably use should more in common conversation here, but with ought, the obligation is slightly stronger than it is with should. So it's a good word to become familiar with so that you can start being really precise in what you're saying. Think, or the infinitive to think, is the main verb. The concert ought to be over by 9:30. That's expressing a likelihood. It should be over by 9:30. But it's a strong likelihood. To be is, of course, the main verb. Shall and will are used to express future time, and they can be used pretty interchangeably. We don't use shall very much anymore. It's a little formal sounding, but if you ever see it, it really just means the same thing as will. I will call you when I get home. Call being the main verb. Should is used to express a recommendation, an obligation, or a possibility. So as I said a few moments ago, it's very similar to ought, and we use it more than we use ought. In both of the cases previously where we used ought, we could have substituted should, but just notice the subtle difference with ought and should, that should is more of the recommendation. It's slightly less strong than ought. You should reschedule your appointment before the office closes. This is a suggestion. If I said ought to reschedule your appointment before the office closes, that's a very strong suggestion. That's kind of saying you better do this. It's kind of the degree of the strength of these words is should is kind of the weaker one. Must is the strongest, and ought goes somewhere in the middle. Reschedule's the main verb. I should have asked permission before borrowing your favorite sweater. Asked is the main verb. The weather on Sunday should be perfect for the beach. It's likely going to be that way. Be is, of course, the main verb. Would has a bunch of different jobs. One of the things would does is express the conditional form of a verb. Conditional means that whatever is being expressed by the main verb will only come to be true or come to exist if certain conditions are met. And there's more about this in the video on the mood form of verbs, because this fits directly in with the ideas about the subjunctive. The conditional form usually appears in an independent clause that is linked to an if clause. And that if clause is explaining under what conditions something will happen. So let's look at an example. If the snowstorm had been earlier, the superintendent would have closed the schools. So the if is the conditional part, right? Under these, if the conditions had been different, if they had been earlier, that's not what happened, but if it had been this way, then the superintendent would have closed the schools. Would is also used to express future time when you have a complex sentence. So the subordinate clause is going to have a main verb that's in the past tense. Sorry, the independent clause has the main verb in the past tense, and the subordinate clause is going to use would instead of will. Eric said at dinner yesterday that he would call me by 8 p.m. tonight. Said is the main verb in the independent clause. Said is in the past tense. So instead of said he will call me, because said is in the past tense, I use would in the subordinate clause. Would is also used to express an action that was repeated in the past but doesn't continue. It's used for a polite request, and it's used to offer an invitation. Every year that I was in elementary school, our school would have field day. So I use would here because this is talking about a repetitive action in the past that has not continued into the present, because I am no longer in elementary school. Would you please close the window? Polite request kind of softens the please close the window. It's almost giving them an option to say no. And here is some practice for each of the sentences below. Choose the appropriate modal. Some of these, there's more than one possible answer, so don't get too caught up in it. It's really, try to keep the big picture in mind. What's more important is understanding that modals function as helping verbs to help us understand how to interpret the main verb. So this is again where you should pause the video, record your answers, and then restart the video to hear the correct answers. Number 1, if the storm is really bad, we blank lose our power. So I'm looking for a modal that's going to tell us about lose. There are a couple possibilities here. If the storm is really bad is setting up a conditional. What's interesting about this one, though, is that the conditional has an isn't a present tense, which means the storm hasn't happened yet. So instead of using would, we're going to actually use a future directed verb, like might. We might lose our power. May would work here as well. Kind of depends on how strong of a likelihood you'd like to express. 2, blank, you ask your teacher what day the test is. This is probably looking for a polite request, so we're going to use would. Number 3, you blank to check the weather before getting dressed in the morning. Again, a couple possibilities here. You could use should, but then you would say you should check the weather before getting dressed in the morning. Because we have a to, we're going to say ought. You ought to check the weather before getting dressed in the morning, which again, ought expresses a slightly stronger suggestion. So it kind of leaves less room for the audience to say, no, I don't want to. It's more of an obligation than should indicates. Number 4, because you cleaned your room, you blank go out with your friends this evening. So this sounds like we are looking at permission. So we're going to use may. In blank, you reach the box on the top shelf. This is less about permission and more about ability, so we're going to use can.